I'd like to finish up the discussion of neuroanatomy and the divisions of the nervous system. And I want to first apologize for the odd break in the content. So just think of this as being stitched to the previous video. I wish I knew some more editing tools, but I unfortunately don't. So we have very little left to discuss, and some of this I went over in the previous video. Um, but again, part of the central nervous system is the spinal cord. And the spinal cord is a segmented structure, and each segment sends sensory information to the brain and receives motor commands from the brain. So if there is a severing at that segment, the brain cannot receive information that's coming in from the environment, from the sense organs that are below that area. Um, so again, the spinal cord communicates with the sense organs and the muscles below the level of the head. And here we have a section of the spinal column. And as you can see, there's this H looking portion of the spinal segment. Those are the cell bodies. The sensory the cell bodies for the sensory neurons enter through the dorsal root, or that's towards the back, whereas the motor neurons leave through the ventral roots. There are interneurons that connect sensory and motor neurons or connect with the brain. So we saw this when we were looking at the reflex arc. We saw that there was sensory stimuli in the form of tapping or pinching on the dog's Achilles tendon, and that information traveled into the spinal cord via a sensory nerve. There was an interneuron that then relayed the message to a motor neuron that sent a message to the muscle. That was the reflex arc, but there was also interneurons that were making connections, so some of the information went to the brain. So reflex arc sensory neurons to interneurons to motor neurons. And again, there's some information that'll go to the brain. But if you do remember from talking about Sherrington's studies, the communication through the reflex arc was actually faster when they severed the neuronal connections to the brain. Okay, so we're going to finish off with the peripheral nervous system, but I went over this previously when I was talking about the divisions. So again, the peripheral nervous system, it's outside of the brain and the spinal cord, and it is subdivided into the somatic nervous system. It interacts with the external environment. Afferent nerves are sensory nerves, whether they're for touch or maybe even pain information, if it's auditory information, whatever it is, the sensory receptors and the sensory nerves bring information into the CNS. They're afferent nerves, and then motor commands are sent out of the CNS into onto the muscles, and they are afferent nerves. So again, the somatic nervous system keeps us in contact in response to the external environment, where the autonomic nervous system is really regulating the internal environment. And there are subdivisions here, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves. Sympathetic, arousal and relaxation. parasympathetic activation and conservation. No, I'm sorry. It's arousal and activation for sympathetic, relaxation and conservation for parasympathetic. Both are afferent information exiting the central nervous system. Here are the nerves interacting with different organs or glands. Again, the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight. It activates the body in ways that help it cope with stress or demands, emotional or physical stress and emergencies. And it has most of its ganglia or cell bodies in a sympathetic ganglion chain. They are more likely to be activated together or in sympathy. The parasympathetic nervous system slows the activity of the organs. It increases digestion. Again, it's the rest and restore function. And like I said earlier in our conversation, it kind of seems like when one's on, the other's off. That's not how it works. They can both be active at different times and different organs for different responses in varying degrees. So yeah, again, I'm sorry for the weird cut of the two videos. I wish I knew how to stitch them together. If any of you know, please let me know and we can work on that together. So thank you for listening, and I hope that was clear. If you have any questions, let me know.